Well, here we are at the final steps for our wraps. Congratulations on finishing the majority of the stitching, all of the stitching. I know that finishing steps can be such a drag because you've already put in all of this work, you are ready to wear your finished piece, and yet there's all these extra steps that need to be done. I promise you though, taking the effort to do these final steps will take your project from homemade to handmade, if you know what I'm saying. It just gives it that extra bit of polish that really makes these look professional. What we're going to be doing now is weaving in our ends, blocking our final piece, and adding the tassels. As you can see here, especially with this knit piece, even though we did this garter stitch edging, it's still curling a little bit because we've got this stockinette stripe just prior to the garter stitch edge. So blocking our pieces are going to really help with that. Adding the tassels adds this extra little bit of weight to the corners that makes them look so beautiful when they're worn. And of course, weaving in the ends is necessary. I know sometimes that can be a little scary for a beginner, so let me show you exactly how I do that on each of these. I find weaving in ends on crochet projects to be much easier than weaving in ends on knitting projects because the stitches are thicker, the fabric is more dense, and it's kind of just easier to hide your ends. So with this project, it's really simple. I like to just, you thread your tail onto a tapestry needle. I like to use these bent tapestry needles. I'll put a link to them in the description here of this video. It just helps you access the stitches a little bit easier when you've got that bent tip. And these are like a standard knitting tapestry needle size. The eye here is nice and big, so it's easy to fit a variety of different weights of yarn through. I don't know if you saw that, but what I like to do is fold over the yarn over the tip of the needle like this, and then slide it off and put that little folded edge into the eye of the needle. If you were to just try and fit this end in, you can see there's all these different plies of the yarn, and it's sometimes difficult to get them all through without the yarn fraying. So that's just a little tip there. And I use this size tapestry needle for everything from super bulky weight down to, probably a DK. Sometimes these needles get a little bit too thick to fit into a fingering, a sport weight, or a lace weight. You just don't want to add any stretch. You want to stretch out your stitches when you're using a lighter weight yarn. But for bulky, for super bulky, worsted and DK, this is my go-to. So all we're gonna do here with the crochet project, the right side of the fabric is where you've got these little bobble stitches. I like to weave in all of my ends from the wrong side just to ensure that they're not poking through onto the right side. With our magic loop here that we started this project, it's already kind of taut right here, but I like to just go kind of around those stitches that are at the base of the magic loop, magic circle, magic ring, whatever you like to call it, to strengthen that loop and also help keep it closed a little bit more rather than tying a knot. And then you're basically just tracing your stitches around the work. So I'm going to go under the legs of this row a little bit here. I usually go in one direction for about an inch or two, and then in the other direction for another inch or two, just so that my yarn, and I'm kind of just weaving around, going underneath different loops here. Like I said, with crochet, it's really easy to hide things. But if you go in two different directions or in rings, kind of like I'm doing, weaving around like this, there's no right way to do this, then your yarn is going to be less likely to unravel, because if you pull it in one direction, the yarn is going in the opposite one as well, so it's not just going to fly out of your work. That's why I don't like to simply work over my ends in crochet, because then they're only being caught under the stitches in one direction. So if you stretch the fabric, it can pop out really easily, whereas if it's going in both directions and you pull on it, your yarn is trapped both ways, so it's not really going to poke out as easily. So like I said, just kind of weave around. There's really no right or wrong way to do this, particularly with crochet, because your stitches don't have as much definition as they do with knitting, so you're much less likely to see the ends as well. And since the fabric is more dense, it's not really adding bulk to it the way that it does with knit fabric. So it's just super, super simple to hide these ends. Falling of the edge there. And with crochet, you know, you don't have to be so precious. You can even tie knots if you want to secure your ends even further. The knots are really easily hidden in crochet fabric once again, so that's a great way to do it too, if you're not afraid of tying knots like me. Then I'm just going to snip off my end pretty close to the fabric there. And as you can see, it's totally hidden in that fabric, especially from the front side. Can't see that there was an end there at all. So I'm gonna go ahead and weave in all of the extra ends on this project, and I will get over to my knit wrap and show you how to weave in those ends. Here we are about to weave in the ends on our knit wrap. I'm gonna start at the very center top of the wrap where we actually cast on our first stitches. So just like I did, if you missed the crochet tutorial, what I like to do to insert my yarn into this needle, instead of just sticking the end through there, this yarn is pretty fine since it's worsted weight, and this is a pretty big eye needle, so you potentially could do that very easily. But my kind of go-to method is to fold the yarn over the tip of the needle that you insert into the fabric and slide it off. So you've got a nice sharp fold there that really easily slides into the eye of that needle and just makes it really easy. And this needle, like I said in the crochet tutorial, I will link it in the description below. This is the same needle that I use for DK through super bulky weight fabric, so it's really versatile. I love these. They're floating around literally all of my bags, my car, my purse, anywhere that I can put them, I put them because I always need them. So my first step here with weaving in the ends on the knit fabric is to kind of close up this little gap that's formed by our cast on stitches here. So all I'm going to do is insert my needle, and again, this is not, I don't do this really preciously at all. I'm just going to insert my needle somewhere along the edge, probably usually under 2 loops here of the left side where the yarn is not coming out of. And I'm going to kind of do a figure 8 where I'm pulling this over. Now I'm going to go under 2 loops of this side. And that just closes that up really, really nicely. It might not be absolutely perfect, but who is going to see this tiny little moment right here? So I am someone who also ties knots in my work. You know, sue me. It just helps me feel like everything is more secure, and I have never seen them. No one ever notices them. I think they're great. So I'm just gonna tie even just a single knot at the top here to keep that fabric, to keep these ends nice and tight. And now I'm gonna weave in this end. So I don't simply tie a knot and then cut it off. I still weave in the ends as well. This is just an extra security step to make sure if the end ever does somehow come unwoven, it will not unravel my entire project from the top down. So the stitches here are a little funky. I'm just going to kind of move my yarn underneath some of these purl bumps from the back of the work to get it to a place where I've got kind of a row of stitches to work with. And really when I am weaving in my ends, see, if you do this from the back of the work under those purl bumps, you can't see it from the front of the work. It's totally invisible. When I am weaving in ends on knit fabric, I really just like to basically do a duplicate stitch. So I'm gonna start that right here. As you can see, I'm just gonna follow some of these lines from the previous rows, tracing my stitches in duplicate stitch and trapping this end. Oops, I lost my tail here. Just add that back. So I'm just trapping my ends in the existing stitches, and I'll do that for about an inch or so. And then I'm going to go up a row and begin doing this in the opposite direction. So now I'm going back this way. This is why it's good to have a nice long tail so it doesn't get complicated when you are at the end of the weaving in, and you don't have to worry about it sliding off sliding out of your needle. There's a great Pearl Soho tutorial for weaving in ends that I will link in the description box here. That's a photo tutorial, so it's really easy to see step by step. But that is basically how I weave in, whoops, all of my ends here. Sorry for the wobbliness. And I'm gonna go ahead and do that for all of my ends here, and then we will move on to making our tassels. Okay, we're ready to make our tassels, and my biggest tip when it comes to tassels is find yourself a hardback book where the measurement across the width of the book is half of the length of the strands you're meant to cut. So this book is about 5 inches across. I'm gonna be cutting 10-inch strands, so this is perfect. The reason you want a hardback book is because we're gonna be wrapping the strands around this book to easily cut a high quantity of uniform strands. And then you're gonna use your scissors to cut across the top of the length here so that one wrap will be 10 inches in my case. And the fact that the pages don't go all the way to the ends of the book cover, you have this nice little dip right here, makes it really easy to get your scissors in there to cut. You could also use a paperback book, but you're not gonna have this situation here, so it's a little harder to wedge your scissors underneath those wraps. So a hardback book is a great tool to use when it comes to making tassels. Whether you're making the knit wrap or the crochet wrap, the tassels we're making here are gonna be exactly the same. For both wraps, you're gonna wanna cut 90 strands of your color A. You could really use any color you like here, as long as you've got enough left over of that color. And you're gonna cut 90 strands and then divide those into 3 groups of 30. Since I'm just gonna demonstrate one tassel here, I'm only going to wrap 30 times because I'm just gonna make one. So go ahead and start that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, I've got my 30 wraps here. And I'm just going to, like I said, insert the scissors underneath all of those. Makes it really easy because you've got that space from your dip there. And now, with the exception of that first little piece, I've got 30 strands that are all the same length, 10 inches in my case, perfect length. Now I am using my color B for the crochet wrap. Color B for my knit wrap, and this is color C or D, I think, for the crochet one. Anyway, you can use any strand that you have left over for this project, from your project as well for this part. You're gonna have 2 18-inch lengths of the alternate color. You could also use the same color that you're making the body of your tassel out of, and you're just going to wrap that around the center point of your lengths, so fold them over, and you're simply tying a double knot around that bundle. And this is going to serve as the top of your tassel. Easy peasy. Now you want to take your second strand and insert it into your tapestry needles. So I'll do my same little fold over and pinch to insert that into the eye nice and easily. And we're going to tie the other end of this about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch down from the top of our tassel. So you can lay it on top, straighten that out a little bit, and just tie a double knot here. Like so. And with the end that has your needle attached, go ahead, it's a little difficult to do this in midair, but you're going to wrap this around several times. I usually do about maybe 6 times or so. You want to do this nice and tightly so that it's secure and so that this forms a nice little kind of ball at the top. Once you've gone around several times, you just take this end of your tapestry needle and insert it down into the center of your tassel, and it will secure that end really nicely. You can kind of manipulate this a little bit if you want to slide it up or down, and try to make these uniform across all of your tassels. And then these two ends will just be kind of hidden in the middle of that tassel once it's tied on. Let me show you how to attach this. It will be the same for both the knit or the crochet wrap, like I said, because these are identical. Go ahead and make 3 of these, and you're going to put 1 on each corner of your triangle. So like I said, the tassel is going to be the same and the attaching is going to be the same regardless of the wrap that you did. I am just showing you here at the point of the triangle. You would insert, all you have to do is put 1 strand of your top of your tassel onto your tapestry needle, and you're either going to insert it into this space here. Any 2 or 3 strands basically you want to go under at the very tip of one of your corners. In this case, this is the bottom middle corner of the knit wrap. I actually made this for the crochet wrap color wise, so I'm going to attach this to the crochet wrap. But again, you're going to go up. I'm just going to insert it right into where I made all of my increases there, so the very center part of this wrap. And then you are going to just tie this on. I like to use a double knot. It's fairly easy. And then to hide both of these ends, you can take that out and string both of these onto your tapestry needle. So you've got both ends now of your top of your tassel. And once again, you're just going to insert that down the center of your tassel. Pull them tightly. End out there, and then you just tug on that a little bit. It is perfectly attached now. You can go ahead and trim the ends of all of these if you want to, down to the length you prefer for your tassel. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how I block both of these and how I get my tassel ends to be nice and straight, which makes this project look extra polished. Time to block our work. This is something that is, in my opinion, essential for both the knit and the crochet wrap, but for different reasons. Here I have the crochet wrap, and this fabric is much more dense. It's much more thick than the knit fabric. And I think that blocking it just helps relax it a little bit and make it extra drapey so that it can be tied in multiple ways, and it really goes over the shoulders really beautifully. It's not going to feel extra bulky, even though this fabric is more dense. The blocking really helps to relax the stitches and just make it much more drapey, much more flexible. When it comes to fabric that is made from 100% acrylic yarns, you want to be careful because a lot of blocking methods utilize heat. Of course, you could wet block these projects, but I don't really have time for that. I don't know about you. I am impatient to wait, and so my favorite method involves a steamer. And I love to use this steamer here. I will link it in the comments, or sorry, in the description below, because you can use it horizontally. So it's perfect to go over your stitches like this, and I just find it super easy to use. You want to be sure not to hover over one area too much with this steamer. If you don't have a steamer like this, you can also use an iron, and in that case, you're going to want to just lay down a tea towel or some thin piece of fabric, even a sheet, over your fabric to protect it, because you cannot touch the face of the iron to an acrylic fiber or a polyester fiber or anything man-made. It will melt your yarn, and you do not want that. So putting down the piece of fabric, whether it's a tea towel or a sheet, will just create a nice barrier between the face of the iron and your fabric. And then I like to make sure that that piece of fabric is nice and wet. So you lay it down over your project, and then as you put the iron on a hot setting and hover it over, do not even press it into the fabric. You just want to hover it over and surge the steam from the iron into the fabric, and basically because your towel or your sheet is wet, it's going to create steam between itself and your crochet fabric, and it will in and of itself steam it. So it's basically a little workaround if you don't have a steamer like this. I'm going to plug this in and show you how this works. So like I said, something to be mindful of is not to hover in one place for too long, because even though this isn't an iron and I'm not touching it to the face of the fabric, you can end up doing something called killing the fibers when it comes to acrylic yarn. And basically what that means is you're basically rendering the yarn lifeless. Now, that can actually be a design choice when it comes to especially a wrap like this. If you have just simple stitches without textures, you can kill the fiber and that will make it super, super drapey and very silky actually. That can be a technique that you can use if you like. But when it comes to something like this, where we've got these beautiful textured stitches that I still want to pop up from the fabric below, I don't want to kill those fibers because that will just flatten those out and there's really no way to bring it back to life once that's done. So just be mindful of that and don't hover in one spot for too long. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my steamer on. There we go. And you can use blocking pins if you like. I'll also link these blocking mats in the description below as well. You can also do this on the floor, on a big towel, or if you have carpet. Of course, the blocking pins will help keep this in place, and you would just put them every interval, every few inches or so. But you're just gonna go ahead and do this all over your wrap. And then I also like to make sure that I steam my tassels, because the tassels a lot of times can be very, very kinky, and when you steam them, it just makes them look so nice and smooth and professional. So make sure you do that as well. And that's really all there is to it with this blocking method. Because it is steam and you're not wet blocking, you don't have to wait ages for it to dry. I do like to just let it cool for maybe 10-15 minutes or so to ensure that there really is no moisture left in it, and that's just going to help it lock it into place. There's not too much blocking when it comes to the crochet wrap in terms of shaping it, because it's so structured already, so you don't really have to deal with any curling or anything like that, where you would need to do that with the knit wrap, which I will show you next. Our knit wrap is already nice and drapey thanks to the thinner and less dense knit fabric in comparison to the crochet wrap. So for blocking, yes, it will relax the stitches and it will help with drape, but you don't need to do that too much with the knit wrap. The main reason to block this piece is actually to minimize this curling that happens along the bottom edge. And I know that we added our garter rows here, but because we had our stockinette rows just before that, it still has a tendency to curl where that stockinette fabric is. So in this case, I am going to actually utilize some blocking pins so that I can block this into place. So I'm going to just insert them every couple of inches . Along. These grid lines really help keep everything even. I will link these blocking mats as well in the description because I find them very, very helpful when it comes to blocking. I'm just gonna do a few of these so you get the sense of it. And of course, you're going to have your tassel attached here as well, and you'll want to go ahead and steam that. Watch the crochet tutorial to see how I do that. It just makes the tassel look really nice and even and professional, and it's not going to be all kinky, especially if you're photographing your wrap. You want it to look really nice and polished, right? So I've got my steamer going here. You want to make sure not to get it too close. I explained this in the crochet section, but you don't want to melt your fabric. When you're using an acrylic yarn like this, or a polyester, or anything man-made, there is a tendency to, well, it will melt because it's plastic essentially. So you want to be extra mindful of that. You can also, if you don't have a steamer like this, you can use horizontally. You can use an iron that has a steam surge function on it. And you can just lay a wet tea towel over your fabric and then put the iron hovered. Again, don't press into the fabric above that. Another reason we don't want to press into the fabric is what can happen with an acrylic fiber like this is that it will do something called killing the fiber. And basically it's a form of melting it. and it just takes away any of this beautiful texture. It kind of just flattens all of the stitches, which can be a design choice if you want a really beautiful drapey fabric, if you're just using like a single stitch the entire time and you don't have any of this beautiful texture. But if you want to maintain this texture, definitely don't let your steamer or your iron hover in one place for too long, because you don't want to melt that fabric or kill the fiber. So you're just going to do this all over your wrap, then let it stay in place with these pins in place for maybe 10 to 15 minutes to ensure that all of the moisture from the steam has dried up and it's nice and cool to the touch. The fabric, you don't want it to be warm any longer, and that will really lock this shape into place and you won't have any of that curling. It's such a nice technique, and like I said, it just adds a polished look to your wrap and it will make it look extra beautiful. So I just wanted to show you, this is the area that I blocked. You can see it's sitting nice and flat. It's all dry now and it looks perfect and beautiful. And then as you move up here where I haven't blocked it, it's still curling over pretty significantly. So the blocking helps so much with relaxing those stitches and making it look really polished. That's it, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and attach all of my tassels to this knit wrap and take the final photos. I hope you've all enjoyed this knit along and crochet along. I had so much fun putting it all together for you. Please tag me in all of your finished pieces. I can't wait to see the different landscapes and vistas that you chose, and explain to me, tell me how these vistas and landscapes are meaningful to you. I would love to know the story behind your choices.